Hey crew, it's Pitt and I am back with some more Esoterica. Today we are diving back into the works of Mr. Manly Hall. This is the Secret Teachings of All Ages. We are up to chapter 18, I believe. Stones, Metals, and Gems. I'm reading aloud. We are discussing as we go along. It is not the format for everyone, but some people seem to enjoy it, so you are more than welcome to stick around. There will probably be at least a little bit of a level of responsibility in this. I have not read through it, so I do not know for sure, but I am fairly positive because of the topic that we are discussing, there may be something revealed. You're welcome to hang around for that too. If you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if you get lost in the terminology and want to know a little bit more about what I am saying, I have several playlists that will be linked in this corner. There will be a standalone video for sure that explain things. It is also linked in the box down below along with the source material so that you can go back and read this for yourself. Do not ever take what I say as gospel. I am talking about the things that I know. I try to stay away from the things that I don't, but some of the things I know may step on some toes. With all of that being said, we are going to dive into the text and discuss stones, metals, and gems. Each of the four primary elements, as taught by the early philosophers, has its analog in the quaternary terrestrial constitution of man. The rocks and earth correspond to the bones and flesh, the water to the various fluids, the air to the gases, and the fire to the bodily heat. Since the bones are the framework that sustains the corporeal structure, they may be regarded as a fitting emblem of the spirit, that divine foundation which supports the composite fabric of mind, soul, and body. To the initiate, the skeleton of death, holding in bony fingers the reaper's scythe, denotes Saturn, Kronos, the father of the gods, carrying the sickle with which he mutilated Ouranos, his own sire. In the language of the mysteries, the spirits of men are the powdered bones of Saturn. The latter deity was always worshipped under the symbol of the base or footing, inasmuch as he was considered to be the substructure upholding creation. The myth of Saturn has its historical basis in the fragmentary records preserved by the early Greeks and Phoenicians concerning a king by that name who ruled over the ancient continent of Hyperborea. Polaris, Hyperborea, and Atlantis, because they lie buried beneath the continents and oceans of the modern world, have frequently been symbolized as rocks supporting on their broad surfaces new lands, races, and empires. According to the Scandinavian mysteries, the stones and cliffs were formed from the bones of Ymir, a primordial giant of the seething clay, while the Hellenic mystics of the rocks were the bones of the great mother, Gaia. If you would like to see what I talk about as far as Atlantis, I have my own theory. It is contained in the works of Plato. I read through Timaeus and Critias so that we could get the actual description of Atlantis and how it lies. I have slightly different views from Mr. Manly Hall on this, and so you should definitely check that out if it is something that interests you. It is in the Ancient Lore playlist, I believe. There's a separate playlist for Plato, so you can find it there as well. After the deluge sent by the gods to destroy mankind at the close of the Iron Age, only Deucalion and Pyrrha were left alive. Entering the ruined sanctuary to pray, they were directed by an oracle to depart from the temple, and with heads veiled and garments unbound, cast behind them the bones of their mother. Construing the cryptic message of the god to mean that the earth was the great mother of all creatures, Deucalion picked up loose rocks and, bidding Pyrrha to do likewise, cast them behind him. From these rocks there sprang forth a new and stalwart race of human beings, the rocks thrown by Deucalion becoming men, and those thrown by Pyrrha becoming women. In this allegory is epitomized the mystery of human evolution, for spirit, by ensouling matter, becomes that indwelling power which gradually but sequentially raises the mineral to the status of the plant to the plane of the animal to the dignity of man, and man to the estate of the gods. If you are unfamiliar, we have gone over this in this very playlist a couple of videos back. I have the theory of spiritual evolution, and it aligns very much in accordance with this. Again, it is something we have already talked about, so I'm not going to dig into it too deep, but the spiritual evolution is A real thing in my estimation, and this is the beginnings of that formulation. The solar system was organized by forces operating inward from the great ring of the Saturnian sphere. And since the beginning of all things were under the control of Saturn, the most reasonable inference is that the first forms of worship were dedicated to him and his peculiar symbol, the stone. Thus, the intrinsic nature of Saturn is synonymous with that spiritual rock which is the enduring foundation of the solar temple, and it has its antitypic or lower octave in that terrestrial rock, the planet Earth, which sustains upon its jagged surface the diversified genera of mundane life. Although its origin is uncertain, litholatry undoubtedly constitutes one of the earliest forms of religious expression. Throughout all the world, writes Godfrey Higgins, the first object of idolatry seems to have been a plain, unwrought stone, placed in the ground as an emblem of the generative or procreative powers of nature. See the Celtic Druids. Remnants of stone worship are distributed over the greater part of the earth's surface, a notable example being the menhirs at Carnac, in Brittany, where several thousands of these gigantic uncut stones are arranged in 11 orderly rows. Many of these monoliths stand over 20 feet out of the sand in which they are embedded, and it has been calculated that some of the larger ones weigh as much as 250,000 pounds. By some, it is believed that certain of the menhirs mark the location of buried treasure, but the most plausible view is that which regards Karnak as a monument to the astronomical knowledge of the antiquity. Scattered throughout the British Isles and Europe, these cairns, dolmens, menhirs, and cisternes stand as mute but eloquent testimonials to the existence and achievements of races now extinct. Of particular interest are the rocking or Logan stones, which evince the mechanical skill of these early peoples. These relics consist of enormous boulders poised upon one or two small points in such a manner that the slightest pressure will sway them, but the greatest effort is not sufficient to overthrow them. These were called living stones by the Greeks and Latins, the most famous one being the Gregorian stone in the Strait of Gibraltar. Though so perfectly balanced that it could be moved with the stalk of a daffodil, this rock could not be upset by the combined weight of many men. There is a legend that Hercules raised a rocking stone over the graves of the two sons of Boreas, whom he had killed in combat. This stone was so delicately poised that it swayed back and forth with the wind, but no application of force could overturn it. A number of Logan stones have been found in Britain. Traces of one no longer standing have been discovered in Stonehenge. See the Celtic Druids. It is interesting to note that the green stones forming the inner ring of Stonehenge are believed to have been brought from Africa. That is a long way to carry some rocks, I'm going to tell you. In many cases, the monoliths are without carving or inscription, for they undoubtedly antedate both the use of tools and the art of writing. In some instances, the stones have been trued into columns or obelisks, as in the runic monuments and the Hindu lingams and Sakti stones. In other instances, they are fashioned into rough likenesses of the human body, as in the Easter Island statues, or into the elaborately sculpted figures of the Central American Indians and the Khmers of Cambodia. The first rough stone images can hardly be considered as effigies of any particular deity, but rather as the crude effort of primitive man to portray in the enduring qualities of stone the procreative attributes of abstract divinity. An instinctive recognition of the stability of deity has persisted through all the intervening ages between primitive man and modern civilization. Ample proof of the survival of litholatry in the Christian faith is furnished by allusions to the rock of refuge, the rock upon which the Church of Christ was founded, the cornerstone which the builders rejected, Jacob's stony pillow which he set up and anointed with oil, the sling stone of David, the rock Moriah upon which the altar of King Solomon's temple was erected, the white stone of Revelation, and the rock of ages. Stones were highly venerated by prehistoric peoples, primarily because of their usefulness. Jagged bits of stone were probably man's first weapons. Rocky cliffs and crags constituted his first fortifications, and from these vantage points he hurled loose boulders down upon marauders. In caverns or rude huts fashioned from slabs of rock, the first humans protected themselves from the rigors of the elements. Stones were set up as markers and monuments to primitive achievement. They were also placed upon the graves of the dead, probably as a precautionary measure to prevent the depredations of wild beasts. During migrations, it was apparently customary for primitive peoples to carry about with them stones taken from their original habitat. As the homeland or birthplace of a race was considered sacred, these stones were emblematic of that universal regard shared by all nations for the place of their geniture. The discovery that fire could be produced by striking together two pieces of stone augmented man's reverence for stones, but ultimately the hitherto unsuspected world of wonders opened by the newly discovered element of fire caused pyrolatry to supplant stone worship. The dark, cold Father Stone gave birth out of itself to the bright, glowing sun fire, and the newly born flame, by displacing its parent, became the most impressive and mysterious of all religio-philosophic symbols, widespread and enduring throughout the ages. Saturn, swallowing the stone, substituted for Jupiter from Catraris Imagini degli Antichi. That's interesting. Saturn, having been warned by his parents that one of his own children would dethrone him, devoured each child at birth. At last, Rhea, his wife, in order to save Jupiter, her sixth child, substituted for him a rock enveloped in swaddling clothes, which Saturn, ignorant of the deception practiced upon him, immediately swallowed. Jupiter was concealed on the island of Crete until he attained manhood, when he forced his father to disgorge the 5 children he had eaten. The stone swallowed by Saturn in lieu of his youngest son was placed by Jupiter at Delphi, where it was held in great veneration and was daily anointed. The body of everything was likened to a rock, trued either into a cube or more ornately chiseled to form a pedestal, while the spirit of everything was likened to the elaborately carved figure surmounting it. Accordingly, altars were erected as a symbol of the lower world, and fires were kept burning upon them to represent that spiritual essence illuminating the body it surmounted. The square is actually one surface of a cube, its corresponding figure in plane geometry, and its proper philosophic symbol. Consequently, when considering the earth as an element and not as a body, the Greeks, Brahmins, and Egyptians always referred to its 4 corners, although they were fully aware that the planet itself was a sphere. Because their doctrines were the sure foundation of all knowledge and the first step in the attainment of conscious immortality, the mysteries were often represented as cubical or pyramidal stones. Conversely, these stones themselves became the emblem of that condition of self-achieved godhood. The unchangeability of the stone made it an appropriate emblem of God, the immovable and unchangeable source of existence, and also of the divine sciences, the eternal revelation of himself to mankind. As the personification of the rational intellect, which is the true foundation of human life, Mercury, or Hermes, was symbolized in a like manner. Square or cylindrical pillars, surmounted by a bearded head of Hermes, and called Herme, were set up in public places. Terminus, a form of Jupiter, and a god of boundaries and highways, from whose name is derived the modern word terminal, was also symbolized by an upright stone, sometimes ornamented with the head of the god, which was placed at the borders of provinces and at the intersections of important roads. The philosopher's stone is really the philosophical stone, for philosophy is truly likened to a magic jewel, whose touch transmutes base substances into priceless gems like itself. Wisdom is the alchemist's power of projection, which transforms many thousand times its own weight of gross ignorance into the precious substance of enlightenment. The tablets of the law. While upon the heights of Mount Sinai, Moses received from Jehovah 2 tablets bearing the characters of the Decalogue, traced by the very finger of Israel's God. These tables were fashioned from the divine sapphire, Sekhithia, which the Most High, after removing from his own throne, had cast into the abyss to become the foundation and generator of the worlds. This sacred stone, formed of the heavenly dew, was sundered by the breath of God, and upon its 2 parts were drawn in black fire the figures of the law. These precious inscriptions that glow with celestial splendor were delivered by the Lord on the Sabbath day into the hands of Moses, who was able to read the illumined letters from the reverse side because of the transparency of the great jewel. See the Secret Doctrine in Israel, or the Zohar, for details on this legend. It has to be extra biblical because we have done a Bible study where we talked about these tablets and how they were not actually what was in the inside, right? There was the covenant, which was signed in blood by a group of people in order to form a covenant with an entity who desired blood. That is true. But the giving of the tablets may not have been conveyed exactly correctly, and we talk about that in some length in the Bible study in Exodus, where it would naturally be, and you are more than welcome to go back and see exactly why I do not hold these people in the esteem that some other people do. Some of these extra biblical texts were made up completely in their entirety in order to help venerate these people, and I refuse to take part in that particular thing. I believe that all humans were created equal, every single one of us, and that nobody was a chosen people. There can be a chosen person within any peoples, but there cannot be a chosen people just because they are people, because God makes people. And if God were to choose a people, I firmly believe that he would have chosen people who would have had the slightest ability to keep his law in any manner whatsoever, and the entirety of the Old Testament is the exact opposite of that, and not only the exact opposite of that, but it is God himself rewarding people for breaking everything that he put into the 10 Commandments. You don't like that? You should definitely go back and check out the Old Testament, because that's what it says. The 10 Commandments are the 10 shining gems placed by the Holy One in the sapphire sea of being. And in the depths of the matter, the reflections of these jewels are seen as the laws governing the sublunary spheres. They are the sacred 10 by which the Supreme Deity has stamped his will upon the face of nature. This same decad was celebrated by the Pythagoreans under the form of the tetrus, the triangle of spermatic points which revealed the initiated the whole working of the cosmic scheme. For 10 is the number of perfection. No. The key to creation. No. And the proper symbol of God, man, and the universe. And again, no. Not at all. Not even a little bit. And I know that this is going to step on toes, but 10 is absolutely how we do math. If it was not for 10, we would not be where we are. But if it was not for the fact that reality is base 8, you would not be seeing me right now. Your screen that you're watching this on is based on base 8. The processor that puts the image on the screen that you are looking on operates off of base 8. The memory that goes into that, the data functions, the way that it is drawn from existence itself is based upon base 8. You are based upon base 8. The fundamental number of the universe ends in 8. 1, 3, 8 is an important number. It is 1, the divinity, 3, the Trinity, and 8, that represents you. It is the 7 internal and 1 external chakra that you have access to, and it is manifest in so many ways that I made a whole video that is called the fundamental harmonics of life, so that you can, or fundamental harmonics of creation, so that you can see exactly what I'm talking about in some detail. Again, I talked about it for an hour there, so I'm not going to here. But if any of this pissed you off, you should check out that video. Next up, because of the idolatry of the Israelites, Moses deemed the people unworthy to receive the sapphire tables. No, he got pissed off because he was a child. Hence, he destroyed them, that the mysteries of Jehovah should not be violated. For the original set, Moses substituted 2 tablets of rough stone, into the surface of which he had cut 10 ancient letters, while the former tables, partaking of the divinity of the tree of life, blazed forth eternal verities. The latter, partaking of the nature of the tree of good and evil, revealed only temporal truths. Thus the ancient tradition of Israel returned again to heaven, leaving only its shadow with the children of the 12 tribes. One of the 2 tables of stone delivered by the lawgiver to his followers stood for the oral, and the other for the written traditions upon which the rabbinical school was founded. That's not true either. Authorities differ widely as to the size and substance of the inferior tables. Yes. Some describe them as being so small that they could be held in the hollow of a man's hand, and others declared that each table was 10 or 12 cubits in length and of enormous weight. A few even denied that the tables were made of stone, maintaining that they were of a wood called sadir, which, according to the Mohammedans, grows profusely in paradise. The 2 tables signify respectively the superior and the inferior worlds, the paternal and the maternal formative principles. In their undivided state they represent the cosmic androgyne. The breaking of the table signifies obscurely the separation of the superior and the inferior spheres, and also the division of the sexes. In the religious processionals of the Greeks and Egyptians, an ark or ship was carried which contained stone tablets, cones, and vessels of various shapes, emblematic of the procreative processes. The ark of the Israelites, which was patterned after the sacred chest of the Isaac Mysteries, contained 3 holy objects, each having an important phallic interpretation. The pot of manna of it, of course, that's a penis, right? The pot of manna has to be a penis. It is a pot that you put things in that absolutely has to be a penis. Oh my God. The rod that budded, and the tablets of the law, the first, second, and third principles of the creative triad. The manna, the blossoming staff, and the stone tables are also appropriate images, respectively, of the Kabbalah, the Mishnah, and the written law. The spirit, soul, and body of Judaism. When placed in King Solomon's everlasting house that did not last a single generation after Solomon, the Ark of the Covenant contained only the tablets of the law. Does this indicate that even at the early date the secret tradition had been lost, and the letter of the revelation alone remained? As representing the power that fabricated the lower or demiurgic sphere, the tablets of stone were sacred to Jehovah, in contradistinction to the tablets of sapphire that signified the potency that established the higher or celestial sphere. Without doubt, the Mosaic tablets have their prototype in the stone pillars or obelisk placed on either side of the entrance to pagan temples. These columns may pertain to that remote time when men worshipped the Creator through his zodiacal sign of Gemini, the symbol of which is still the phallic pillars of the celestial twins. The 10 Commandments, writes Hargrave Jennings, are inscribed in 2 groups of 5 each, in columnar form. The 5 to the right, looking from the altar, mean the law, and the 5 to the left mean the prophets. Are you kidding me? The right stone is masculine, the left stone is feminine. They correspond to the 2 disjoined pillars of stone, or towers, in front of every cathedral, and of every temple in the heathen times. See the Rosicrucians, their rites and mysteries, because of course you have to self-insert. The same author states that the law was masculine because it was delivered direct from the deity, while the prophets or gospels were feminine because born through the nature of man. The right tablet of the law further signifies Jachin, the white pillar of light. The left tablet, Boaz, the shadowy pillar of darkness. These were the name of the 2 pillars cast from brass set up on the porch of King Solomon's temple. They were 18 cubits in height and beautifully ornamented with wreaths of chainwork, nets, and pomegranates. We talked about that extensively in the Bible study. On the top of each pillar was a large bowl, now erroneously called a ball or globe, one of the bowls probably containing fire and the other water. Self-insertion. The celestial globe, originally the bowl of fire, surmounting the right-hand column, Jachin, symbolized the divine man. The terrestrial globe, the bowl of water, surmounting the left-hand column, Boaz, signified the earthly man. And that is exactly opposite of what it should be. Interesting. These two, oh no, it ain't, hold on. Fire for divine and terrestrial for, okay. Now, the water should be the feminine, right? I'm not going to go, it'll be all right. These two pillars, respectively, connote also the active and passive expressions of divine energy. The sun and the moon, sulfur and salt, good and bad, light and darkness. Between them is the door leading into the house of God, and standing thus at the gates of the sanctuary, they are a reminder that Jehovah is both an androgynous and an anthropomorphic deity. That's almost close to the truth. As two parallel columns, they denote the zodiacal signs of Cancer and Capricorn, which were formerly placed in the chambers of initiation to represent birth and death, the extremes of physical life. They accordingly signify the summer and winter solstices, now known to Freemasons under the comparatively modern appellation of the two St. Johns. And again, that is simply self-insertion. In the mysterious Sephirothic tree of the Jews, these two pillars symbolize mercy and severity. That's close. Standing before the gate of the King Solomon's temple, these columns had the same symbolic import as the obelisks before the sanctuaries of Egypt. When interpreted Kabbalistically, the names of the two pillars mean, "In strength shall my house be established, in the splendor of mental and spiritual illumination." The high priest stood between the pillars as a mute witness to the perfect virtue of equilibrium, that hypothetical point equidistant from all extremes. He thus personified the divine nature of man in the midst of his compound constitution, the mysterious Pythagorean monad in the presence of the duad. On one side towered the stupendous column of the intellect, and on the other the brazen pillar of the flesh. Midway between these two stands the glorified wise man, but he cannot reach this high estate without first suffering upon the cross made by joining these pillars together. No. The early Jews occasionally represented the two pillars, Jachin and Boaz, as the legs of Jehovah, thereby signifying to the modern philosopher that wisdom and love, in their most exalted sense, support the whole order of creation, both mundane and supermundane. And here we have close, right? Life is balance. We have talked about that extensively all through this playlist and several other ones. Life is balance. It is not exclusion. It is not doing away with either one of the two, right? It is finding the balance between them. And they talked about here, oh, what was it? I would have to find it. Wisdom and love. No, that's not it. Anyway, they called it two things, and that's close, right? There are 7 virtues and 7 vices. I have a video on that. The facets of God, I think, is what that one's called. But there are 7 virtues and there are 7 vices. They are coins, right? They're the same coin. Love and hate are the same thing, or love and wrath, which is hate. Those are the same thing, right? You have an extreme on both sides. You have greed and chastity. Charity, not chastity, lust and chastity. These are extremes, right? You are extremely lustful, you're extremely chaste, and both of them are incorrect. You are meant to be in physical union with your mate. You are meant to procreate and be fruitful and multiply. You are meant to live in the middle. You're not meant to be lascivious and have sex with everything that moves, and you are not meant to be chaste and never have sex. That is not the intention of life. The intention of life is the balance. And that is, in part, what is being expressed here. My problem with it is the terminology, right? It is not in any way dependent upon Christianity or Judaism. It was existent prior to. They keep mentioning the duad and Pythagoras. Pythagoras had nothing to do with Judaism. He had nothing to do with Christianity. He was existent outside of the scope of that reality. And yet he was close to correct as well. It's not the control system that brings the truth. The truth is there, and then the control system tries to absorb it and to make it theirs. Telling you that it is better to be chaste than to have a marriage is terrible. And it doesn't matter who said it, it is still terrible. All right, let's go back and look at this. This is Moses receiving the tables of the law. Moses Maimonides, the great Jewish philosopher of the 12th century, in describing the tables of the law written by the finger of God, divides all productions into two general orders: products of nature and products of art. God works through nature and man through art. He asserts in his Guide for the Perplexed, thus the word of the Lord is the hand or active principle by which the will of the Creator is traced upon the face of his creation. The Tanaim, or initiates of the Jewish mystery school, alone possessed a complete understanding of the significance of the Ten Commandments. These laws are esoterically related to the 10 degrees of contemplation, constituting the path of ecstasy, which winds upwards through the 4 worlds and ends in the effulgence of Ein Sof. The Holy Grail. Like the sapphire Scythia, the lapis exilius, crown jewel of the archangel Lucifer, fell from heaven. Michael, archangel of the sun and the hidden God of Israel, at the head of the angelic host, swooped down upon Lucifer and his legions of rebellious spirits. During the conflict, Michael, with his flaming sword, struck the flashing lapis exilius from the coronet of his adversary, and the green stone fell through all the celestial rings into the dark and immeasurable abyss. Out of Lucifer's radiant gem was fashioned the Sangreal, or Holy Grail, from which Christ is said to have drunk at the Last Supper. Now, sorry, I would very much like to have the source material for this. It's not listed here. It's probably one of these books that have already been mentioned that I have not gone through yet, but as far as I know, there is no true, accurate accounting of how the Holy Grail got here. This is definitely not a biblical edition, right? It is not in the Old or the New Testament, this particular. So, while I do not lend special credence to that book, these people do, right? The people who wrote this, even Manly Hall, and like he is apologizing for slight deviations from Christianity all the way through this. When I talk about the self-insertion, that is him doing the apologizing. And so I don't understand where this came from or how this fits, because it is definitely not contained in any of the biblical or extra-biblical books of which I have knowledge. I have been studying this a long time, and I have not seen this particular thing. That does not mean that it does not exist. There are a lot of things that I do not know. I readily admit that. But this is a hard one for me to go with, because this cup was supposedly used to give Jesus or to pull the wine or the vinegar to give to Jesus at the crucifixion, and I just find it hard to believe that the Romans had this sapphire cup made from the crown jewel of the archangel Lucifer, and that's what Christ drank from at the Last Supper. That's what they had at the crucifixion to give him the vinegar. I find that a little bit incredulous. I really do. That sounds again like some self-insertion, right? That's making apologies for something. Though some controversy exists as to whether the Grail was a cup or a platter, it is generally depicted in art as a chalice of considerable size and unusual beauty. According to the legend, Joseph of Arimathea brought the Grail cup to the place of the crucifixion, and in it caught the blood pouring from the wounds of the dying Nazarene. Later, Joseph, who had become custodian of the sacred relics, the Sangreal and the spear of Longinus, carried them into a distant country. According to one version, his descendants finally placed these relics in Glastonbury Abbey in England. According to another, in a wonderful castle on Mount Salvat, Spain, built by angels in a single night. Under the name of Preston John Parsifal, the last of the Grail kings, carried the holy cup with him into India, and it disappeared forever from the Western world. Subsequent search for the Sangreal was the motif for much of the knight-errantry of the Arthurian legends and the ceremonials of the Round Table. See the Morte d'Arthur. No adequate interpretation has ever been given to the Grail mysteries. Some believe the Knights of the Holy Grail to have been a powerful organization of Christian mystics, perpetuating the ancient wisdom under the rituals and sacraments of the oracular cup. The quest for the Holy Grail is the eternal search for truth, and Albert G. Mackey sees in it a variation of the Masonic legend of the lost word, so long sought by the brethren of the craft. I have that word. There is also evidence to support the claim that the story of the Grail is an elaboration of an early pagan nature myth, which has been preserved by reason of the subtle manner in which it was engrafted upon the cult of Christianity. From this particular viewpoint, the Holy Grail is undoubtedly a type of the ark or vessel in which the life of the world is preserved, and therefore is significant of the body of the Great Mother, Nature. Its green color relates it to Venus and the mystery of generation. That's odd, you just said sapphire. And also to the Islamic faith, whose colors is green and whose Sabbath is Friday, the day of Venus. The Holy Grail is a symbol both of the lower or irrational world and of the bodily nature of man, because both are receptacles for the living essence of the superior worlds. Such is the mystery of the redeeming blood, which, descending into the condition of death, overcomes the last enemy by ensouling all substance with its own immortality. To the Christian, whose mystic faith especially emphasizes the love element, the Holy Grail typifies the heart in which continually swirls the living water of eternal life. Moreover, to the Christian, the search for the Holy Grail is the search for the real self, which, when found, is the consummation of the magnum opus. The Holy Cup can be discovered only by those who have raised themselves above the limitations of sensuous existence. In his mystic poem, The Vision of Sir Launfal, James Russell Lowell discusses the true nature of the Holy Grail by showing that it is visible only to a certain state of physical consciousness. Only upon returning from the vain pursuit of haughty ambition did the aged and broken knight see the transformed leper's cup, the glowing chalice of his lifelong dream. Some writers trace a similarity between the Grail legend and the stories of the martyred sun gods, whose blood, descending from heaven into the earth, was caught the cup of matter and liberated therefrom by the initiatory rites. The Holy Grail may also be the seed pod, so frequently employed in the ancient mysteries as an emblem of germination and resurrection. And if the cup-like shape of the Grail be derived from the flower, it signifies the regeneration and spiritualization of the generative forces in man. There are many accounts of stone images which, because of the substances entering into their composition and the ceremonials attendant upon their construction, were ensouled by the divinities whom they were created to resemble. To such images were ascribed various human faculties and powers, such as speech, thought, and even motion. While renegade priests doubtless resorted to trickery, an instance of which is related to a curious apocryphal fragment book entitled Bel and the Dragon, and supposedly deleted from the end of the Book of Daniel. Many of the phenomena recorded in connection with sanctified statues and relics can hardly be explained unless the work of supernatural agencies be admitted. History records the existence of stones which, when struck, threw all those who heard the sound into a state of ecstasy. There were also echoing images which whispered for hours after the room itself had become silent, the musical stones productive of the sweetest harmonies. In recognition of the sanctity which the Greeks and Latins ascribed to the stones, they placed their hands upon certain consecrated pillars when taking an oath. In ancient times, stones played a part in determining the fate of accused persons. for it was customary for juries to reach their verdicts by dropping pebbles into a bag. That was just to keep it anonymous. Divination by stones was often resorted to by the Greeks, and Helena is said to have foretold by lithomancy the destruction of Troy. Many popular superstitions about stones survived these so-called Dark Ages. Chief among these is the one concerning the famous black stone in the seat of the coronation chair in Westminster Abbey, which is declared to be the actual rock used by Jacob as a pillow. That just popped up in Scotland for no reason. The black stone also appears several times in religious symbolism. It was called the Heliogabalus, a word presumably derived from Elagabalus, the Syro-Phoenician sun god. The stone was sacred to the sun and declared to possess great and diversified properties. The black stone in the Kaaba at Mecca is still revered throughout the Mohammedan world. It is said to have been white originally and of such brilliancy that it could be seen many days' journey from Mecca. But as ages passed, it became blackened by the tears of the pilgrims and the sins of the world. And we're going to go ahead and pause here and talk just for a second about tools, because tools are great things. I have several tools around here. This is one of my grounding stones. I use that one quite frequently, and I have another grounding stone because it is the opposite, right? We have generation and we have grounding. I have more stones back here behind my chicken, right? They're all tools and they're wonderful. I use them for various vibratory manipulations, but not a single one of them ever has or ever will be worthy of veneration in any single way whatsoever. This rock that these people are so anxious to kiss is probably entity bound. There is harvesting of energy that does happen in my conspiratorial estimation, and I do believe that these entities feed off of that energy. And one of those entities probably lives in this particular location where they go around in a circle and they like to kiss the rock. It is idol worship in its basest sense. Now, if you are one of those people who venerate this rock, you're like, no, that's just a representation for God. Okay, well, okay. If that's what you want to say, it's okay for you to run around this rock and kiss that rock and say that that's a direct link to God, but draw a picture of Muhammad and see what happens. Same concept, the exact same concept. If you are venerating the tool, you are doing it wrong. It doesn't matter what tool it is. It does not matter how magnificent that tool may happen to be. It could be completely remarkable from every single thing else on the entire planet. And still, it is not worthy of veneration. There is only one thing worthy of veneration in the entirety of creation, and that is the Creator Himself. I think that we're going to get to the next part, and it will talk about what's in the other video. If not, we will talk about it on the backside. The magic of metals and gems. That's why this is why we just talked about the tools not being. According to the teachings of the mysteries, the rays of the celestial bodies striking the crystallizing influences of the lower world become the various elements. Partaking of the astral virtues of their source, these elements neutralize certain unbalanced forms of celestial activity and, when properly combined, contribute much to the well-being of man. Little is known today concerning these magical properties, but the modern world may yet find it profitable to consider the findings of the early philosophers who determined these relationships by extensive experimentation. Out of such research arose the practice of identifying the metals with the bones of various deities. For example, the Egyptians, according to Manetho, considered iron to be the bone of Mars, and the lodestone the bone of Horus. By analogy, lead would be the physical skeleton of Saturn, copper of Venus, quicksilver of Mercury, gold of the sun, silver of the moon, and antimony of the earth. It is possible that uranium will prove to be the metal of Uranus and radium to be the metal of Neptune. If that is true, right, if it is possible that uranium is the metal of Uranus, then the Jews worshipped Uranus. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you definitely need to go back to the Bible study where we talked in extensive detail about the Ark and the Shamir, and what I believe the Shamir to be, which is quartz infused with uranium, and that is what allowed them to discharge the energy that was gathered and stored and amplified by the Ark. I talk about it extensively, so I don't have to do it here. Go back and watch the other video if you were curious about that. Examples of Hermes from Christie's disquisitions upon the painted Greek vases. We'll click it up so y'all can see it. Animal nature and divine nature, I'm assuming, but this is a horrible representation of that. The primitive custom of worshiping the gods in the form of heaps of stones gave place to the practice of erecting phallic pillars or cones, because cones make perfect sense, whatever, in their honor. These columns differed widely in size and appearance. Some were of gigantic proportions and were richly ornamented with inscriptions or likenesses of the gods and heroes. Others, like the votive offerings of the Babylonians, were but a few inches high, without ornament, and merely bore a brief statement of the purpose for which they had been prepared, or a hymn to the god of the temple in which they were placed. These small, baked clay cones were identical in their symbolic meaning with the large Hermes set up by the roadside and in other public places. Later, the upper end of the column was surmounted by a human head. Often two projections or tenons corresponding to shoulders were placed, one on either side, to support the wreaths of flowers adorning the columns. Offerings, usually of food, were placed near the Hermes. Occasionally, these columns were used to uphold roofs and were numbered among the art objects ornamenting the villas of wealthy Romans. The four ages of the Greek mystics, the Golden Age, the Silver Age, the Bronze Age, and the Iron Age, are metamorphic expressions referring to the four major periods in the life of all things. In the divisions of the day, they signify dawn, midday, sunset, and midnight. In the duration of gods, men, and universes, they denote the periods of birth, growth, maturity, and decay. The Greek ages also bear a close correspondence to the four yugas of the Hindus: Krita Yuga, Treta Yuga, the Dvapara Yuga, and Kali Yuga. Their method of calculation is described by Ulamaddian as follows. In each of the 12 signs, there are 1,800 minutes. Multiply this number by 12 and you have 21,600. E.g., 18,000 times 12 equals 21,600. Multiply this 21,600 by 80 and it will give 1,728,000, which is the duration of the first age, called Krita Yuga. If the same number be multiplied by 60, it will give 1,296,000 years, the years of the second age, Treta Yuga. The same number multiplied by 40 gives 864,000 years, the length of the third age, the Dvapara Yuga, and the same multiplied by 20 gives 432,000 years, the fourth age, Kali Yuga. It will be noted that these multipliers decrease in inverse ratio to the Pythagorean tetraces 1, 2, 3, and 4. H.P. Blavatsky declares that Orpheus taught his followers how to affect a whole audience by means of a lodestone, and that Pythagoras paid particular attention to the color and nature of precious stones. She adds, the Buddhists assert that the sapphire produces peace of mind, equanimity, and chases all evil thoughts by establishing a healthy circulation in man. So does an electric battery with its well-directed fluid say to our electricians. The sapphire, say the Buddhists, will open barred doors and dwellings for the spirit of man. It produces a desire for prayer and brings with it more peace than any other gem. But he who would wear it must lead a pure and holy life. Mythology abounds with accounts of magical rings and talismanic jewels. But let's stop real quick. I'm going to go ahead and do this. I was going to hold it for the end, but I have another video. It is crystals and their uses, where I go into, again, extensive detail about some things that I am going to detail in brief right here. There are a lot of people who are tied up in the color of their stones. And while that is in part important, It is also important to note that it is not the main determinant of the effectiveness or use of said stone. The actual crystalline structure is divided into 8 different forms, 7 of which are gem-like, and 1 of which is source. Now, regular stone, such as my grounding stone here, or granite or limestone or whatever, is formed of the one that is outside of the crystalline, right? That does not mean it does not have the crystalline structure. It means that it is missing the necessary refinement of the crystalline structure that is evident through the gems. Let me pull one that is going to be, well, we'll pull 2 different ones, right? We have 2 different stones here. We have a blue one, if you can see it here. This one is blue. And while it will absolutely help you with your third eye meditations, because that is what blue is for, it also is consistent with this, right? It has no crystalline structure as defined by the actual crystalline substances that make up these semi-precious gems. Now, this one is violet or purple. It is a little bit higher along the path so that you can use these things for things. But this one, this particular one, while it is purple and it is good for the top, is actually crystalline according to quartz, which is a base mineral. So what this base mineral does, because it is purple, right, it is for the top, it is for bringing balance between your base chakra and your crown chakra. This particular stone is used to amplify the vibrations of yourself. You hold it in your either power drawing hand or in your power giving hand in order to do the things that you need to do to vibratorily change yourself. It is for bringing into accordance the purple with the base, because it is a base crystalline structure. There are 7 different crystalline structures, and each one of them aligns in corresponding order all the way up to the top. Now, quartz is at the bottom, diamond is at the top. These things also hold true for metals. Lead is at the bottom, gold is at the top. It is due to the nature of the metal. If you don't know, lead comes in a structure that is a little bit different than gold. Now, gold, in its purest form, occurring in nature, occurs in perfectly formed blocks of cubic nature, which is 8. It is in its purest natural form, structurally aligned for the highest attainment, right? Which is actually the divine, but it is the interaction between the divine and you. So there is a reason why we use golden wedding bands, and mine's in there because I was washing dishes. But that is a link of very much you, the divine, and your mate together. That is why we use golden rings. And it is one of the reasons why that ring will help you and your mate to align with each other. It is because of the structural nature of gold. But here's the kicker. It does absolutely nothing if you do not intentionally use it. If you do not invest your energy through your plexus through your hands, right, or the other emanating areas, it does absolutely nothing on its own. It is a tool. And like every single other tool ever in existence, it cannot do anything on its own. There is no stone that is worthy of veneration. There is nothing created that you need to venerate. These are wonderful tools, and you can use them for wonderful things. They will help you to change your life. But it only works through intentionality and the direct manipulation of the forces. And if you don't have the word, you probably will not be able to do the things that you want to do. You cannot really unintentionally hurt yourselves with these stones. You can use them for the superficial nature by which they have been used for thousands of years. You can say that this purple stone is simply for the crown, but that does not make it true. I have a whole video where you can go back and look at his crystals and their uses, and I talk about this in some great detail. It starts off a little bit dry and gets a little bit better. Hang around if you actually want some knowledge. Okay. Back. How to affect a whole audience by means of a lodestone, and that Pythagoras paid particular attention to the color and nature of precious stones. She adds, the Buddhists assert that the sapphire produces peace of mind, equanimity, and chases all evil thoughts by establishing a healthy circulation in man. So does an electric battery with its well-directed fluid, says our electricians. The sapphire, says the Buddhist, will open barred doors and dwellings. For the spirit of man, it produces a desire for prayer and brings with it more peace than any other gem. But he who would wear it must lead a pure and holy life. See Isis Unveiled. Mythology abounds with accounts of magical rings and talismanic jewels. In the second book of his Republic, Plato describes a ring which, when the collet has turned inward, renders its wearer invisible. I do not remember that. We did Plato's Republic. I have that, and I don't remember that, but I could be wrong. I don't know that we did all. Yeah, we did all of the Republic. With this Gyges, the shepherd, secured for himself the throne of Lydia. Josephus also describes magical rings designed by Moses and King Solomon. Yes. And Aristotle mentions one which brought love and honor to its possessor. In his chapter dealing with the subject, Henry Cornelius Agrippa not only mentions the same rings, but states, upon the authority of Philostratus Jarcus, that Apollonius of Tyana extended his life to over 20 years, with the aid of 7 magical rings presented to him by an East Indian prince. Each of these 7 rings was set with a gem partaking of the nature of one of the 7 ruling planets of the week, and by daily changing the rings, Apollonius protected himself against sickness and death by the intervention of the planetary influences. That did not happen. The philosopher, it didn't happen in that manner. What do you mean, Pitt? I mean that unless he was actually investing his energy in it, these rings do nothing. And so, what happened was that he was actually using this ring to invest his energy, right? He was manifesting the thing, and it was not the ring itself that did anything. The same thing was true for Solomon, and that's going to step on some toes. But here's the thing. I'm going to tell y'all something. I fully believe in entities, right? I believe that there are laws which govern those entities, and I believe that you do not have a clue what they might be. If you believe that drawing certain symbols upon the ground will bind a spirit of creation, I've got a bridge for you. Right? There is no sign or symbol that you can draw that will give you power over a creative entity. They can play along, though. They can make you think that. They can trick you in various ways, and that is why, in large part, I do not hold with dealing with the entities. They don't have to play by the same rules that you do, and they can absolutely defeat you and deceive you. I believe that happened to Solomon, and Solomon was not a good fellow. The very least of his crimes was directly contravening the direct order of God himself to not go back to Egypt and buy chariots or horses. And he made his fortune, which is documented in the Bible itself, by doing just that. He was an arms dealer. He dealt in arms. He bought chariots from Egypt and he sold them to other places. He directly contradicted God. As it was written, the kings shall not go back to Egypt and buy horses or chariots. That was a direct revelation from God to one of the prophets, according to the Old Testament. And Solomon directly did the opposite of that. If the attributed I don't know how to say if Solomon actually dealt with trying to control demons, then he was absolutely doing the wrong thing. Now, that is not a stretch for me because I know that David and Solomon both made a complete habit out of doing exactly the wrong thing. But for you, it might be. We will probably talk about that at another point when we get into demonologies and angels and stuff. But again, we're already getting a little bit long, so we're going to go ahead and start wrapping this one up. But if you are unaware of what I am talking about with Solomon, you definitely need to check out the Old Testament in the Unconventional Bible Study. But again, these tools have no power in and of themselves. They only hold power if you invest the power. So what he was doing was using these rings to invest his power into the outcome that he wanted, and therefore that worked. It was not the rings themselves, but rather his investment of the energy that made it so. He believed that the rings would do it, and so they did. That is true in large part for many things. The philosopher also instructed his disciples in the virtues of these talismanic jewels, considering such information to be indispensable to the theurgist. Agrippa describes this preparation of magical rings as follows. When any star, planet, ascends, fortunately with the fortunate aspect or conjunction of the moon, we must take a stone and an herb that is under that star, and make a ring of the metal that is suitable to this star, and in it fasten the stone, putting the herb or root under it, not omitting the inscriptions of images, names, and characters, as also the proper suffumigations. See the 3 books of occult philosophy. The ring has long been regarded as the symbol of attainment, perfection, and immortality. The last because the circlet of precious metal had neither beginning nor end. In the mysteries, rings chased to resemble a serpent with its tail in its mouth, were worn by the initiates as material evidence of the position reached by them in the order. Signet rings, engraved with certain secret emblems, were worn by the Hierophants, and it was not uncommon for a messenger to prove that he was the official representative of a prince or other dignitary by bringing with his message either an impression from his master's ring or the signet itself. The wedding ring originally was intended to imply that in the nature of the one who wore it, the state of equilibrium and completion had been attained. That is not true. This plain band of gold, therefore, bore witness of the union of the higher self, God, with the lower self, nature, and the ceremony consummating this indissoluble blending of divinity and humanity in the one nature of the initiated mystic, constituted the hermetic marriage of the mysteries. In describing the regalia of a magician, Eliphas Levi declares that on Sunday, the day of the sun, he should carry in his right hand a golden wand, set with a ruby or chrysolite. On Monday, the day of the moon, he should wear a collar of 3 strands consisting of pearls, crystals, and selenites. On Tuesday, the day of Mars, he should carry a wand of magnetized steel, and a ring in the same metal set with an amethyst. On Wednesday, the day of Mercury, he should wear a necklace of pearls or glass beads containing mercury, and a ring set with an agate. On Thursday, the day of Jupiter, he should carry a wand of glass or resin, and wear a ring set with an emerald or a sapphire. On Friday, the day of Venus, he should carry a wand of polished copper, and wear a ring set with a turquoise and a crown or diadem decorated with lapis lazuli and beryl. And on Saturday, the day of Saturn, he should carry a wand ornamented with onyx stone, and wear a ring set with onyx and a chain about the neck formed of lead. See the magical ritual of the sanctum regnum. And again, tools have no purpose outside of what you put the energy into. So what he is saying here bears no relevance to actual reality outside of the fact that you believe in it. If you believe in it, you can do things with it. But if you don't, it is completely useless. Paracelsus, Agrippa, Kircher, Lilly, and numerous other magicians and astrologers have tabulated the gems and stones corresponding to the various planets and zodiacal signs. The following list has been compiled from their writings. To the sun is assigned the carbuncle, ruby, and garnet, especially the pyrope, and the other fiery stones, sometimes the diamond. To the moon, the pearl, selenite, and other forms of crystal. To Saturn, the onyx, jasper, topaz, and sometimes lapis lazuli. To Jupiter, the sapphire, emerald, and marble. To Mars, the amethyst, hyacinth, lodestone, and sometimes the diamond. To Venus, the turquoise, beryl, emerald, and sometimes the pearl, alabaster, coral, and carnelian. To Mercury, the chrysolite, agate, and variegated marble. To the zodiac, the same authorities assign the following gems and stones. To Aries, the sardonyx, bloodstone, amethyst, and diamond. To Taurus, the carnelian, turquoise, hyacinth, sapphire, moss agate, and emerald. To Gemini, the topaz, agate, chrysoprase, crystal, and aquamarine. To Cancer, the topaz, chalcedony, black onyx, moonstone, pearl, cat's eye, crystal, and sometimes the emerald. To Leo, the jasper, sardonyx, beryl, ruby, chrysolite, amber, tourmaline, sometimes the diamond. To Virgo, the emerald, carnelian, jade, chrysolite, and sometimes the pink jasper and hyacinth. To Libra, the beryl, sardius, coral, lapis lazuli, opal, and sometimes the diamond. To Scorpio, the amethyst, beryl, sardonyx, aquamarine, carbuncle, lodestone, topaz, and malachite. To Sagittarius, the hyacinth, topaz, chrysolite, emerald, carbuncle, and turquoise. To Capricorn, the chrysoprase, ruby, malachite, black onyx, white onyx, jet, and moonstone. To Aquarius, the crystal, sapphire, garnet, zircon, and opal. To Pisces, the sapphire, jasper, chrysolite, moonstone, and amethyst. And the fact that there is a single stone represented several times lets you know that they really did not know what they were talking about. Sorry. Both the magic mirror and crystal ball are symbols little understood. Woe to that benighted mortal who accepts literally the stories circulated concerning them. He will discover, often at the cost of sanity and health, that sorcery and philosophy, while often confused, have nothing in common. The Persian magi carried mirrors as an emblem of the material sphere which reflects divinity from its every part. The crystal ball, long misused as a medium for the cultivation of psychical powers, is a threefold symbol. It signifies the crystalline universal egg, whose transparent depths creation exists. It is a proper figure of deity previous to its immersion in matter. And 3, it signifies the etheric sphere of the world, in whose translucent essences is impressed and preserved the perfect image of all terrestrial activity. And again, it is a tool, and you can use it for things, including the things that he is telling you you cannot. I do not recommend divination because it is very easy to be misled by trying to foretell the future. There are entities, and several of them are not aligned in your best interest. Meteors, or rocks from heaven, were considered tokens of divine favor and enshrined as evidence of a pact between the gods and the community in which they fell. Curiously marked or chipped natural stones are occasionally found. In China there is a slab of marble, the grain of which forms a perfect likeness of the Chinese dragon. The Oberammergau stone, chipped by nature into a close resemblance to the popular conception of the face of Christ, is so remarkable that even the crowned heads of Europe requested the privilege of beholding it. Stones of such nature were held in the highest esteem among primitive peoples, and even today exert a wide influence upon the religiously minded. The Pythagorean signet ring. From Cartares Imagini Delegi Dea de Gilum Antiqui. The number 5 was peculiarly associated with the Pythagoreans with the art of healing, and the pentagram or 5-pointed star was to them the symbol of health. The above figure represents a magical ring set with talismanic gem bearing pentalpha, or star, formed by 5 different positions of the Greek alpha. On this subject, Mackey writes, the disciples of Pythagoras, who were indeed its real inventors, placed within each of its interior angles one of the letters of the Greek word Helia, or the Latin one salus, both of which signify health, and thus it was made the talisman of health. They placed it at the beginning of their epistles and as a greeting to invoke a secure health to their correspondent. But its use was not confined to the disciples of Pythagoras. As a talisman, it was employed all over the East as a charm to resist evil spirits. And tomorrow we will be in ceremonial magic and sorcery, but for now, we are done with the metals and stones. There are tools. They work. They are real things. Energetic manipulation, in my conspiratorial estimation, is a real thing. I have used it in my own life. I have effected healing in my own life. But it is not because of any of these tools. I have used these tools in various ways. I have affected change through the use of the tools, but the tools don't do it. I did it through the power of God Himself that I direct at His bidding. Right? Anything I do is directly because He told me I can, and that I do it. Right? He has given me the laws of creation. He has given me the knowledge that I am dispensing. Right? When I talk about these crystals, that came from Him. That didn't come from me. All of the things that I am telling you here are to keep you from stepping into the wrong spots. The pentagram can be an effective tool, but it is just as effective as those rings were. It is your energetic investment into the symbol that makes the symbol hold the power. It doesn't matter what the symbol is. It doesn't matter which tool you are using. It is your use of the tools with intention that makes it happen. That is the same with a saw or a hammer as it is with one of these stones or some of these metals. It is the intentional use that lets the tool do its thing. The tool doesn't do anything on its own. Nothing by itself can either condemn or save you outside of God Himself. There is no thing outside of His direct meaning for it. You can use these tools for wonderful things. You can use these tools for terrible things. But the tools themselves hold zero power. If you get scared because you saw a pentagram, that is because you are weak-minded. It's not because the pentagram holds power. If you see the head of Satan or the number 666, and that holds power for you, that is because you give it the power. It is not because of the power contained within it. Numbers can have meaning. Stones can have meaning. They have purposes in life. If you randomly come across one of these, it is because you need some balance in your life in that particular area. If you randomly see the numbers 222, you have a decision to make. If you see 333, it is time to learn something. If it is 444, it is time to understand something. If it is 555, it is time to move forward in your life. And if it is 666, it is time to overcome. And if it is 777, that is the completion. Those numbers are immutable. They are there to show you something. But they don't hold the power themselves. Like you look at the clock, it says 444, it's time to understand something. But that does not tell you what to understand. You need to know that. It is a tool. All of these things are tools. Everything that you can put your hands on is a tool. Some of them are useful for things that are different than others. This hasn't really been a level of responsibility video. If you would like to know what that means or any of that, you should check out the other videos. But we're not getting into the specific mechanics of how to do the things, so you're not responsible for that. And then you're really not even responsible for anything in this other than knowing the tools don't hold the power. You do. That is just as true for these stones as it is going to be tomorrow for this ceremonial magic and sorcery. I am definitely going to step on some toes in that one, but that's okay. That's kind of what I do over here. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment, not too much confusion, and possibly a little bit of levity to some somewhat complicated topics. I have an extensive list of things where I talk about these things in more detail so that you can go back and understand what I am talking about. I highly recommend that if at any point in this conversation you were like, wait, what is he talking about? check out the playlist. It will answer your questions. I am throwing the knowledge out there just as much as I can. I try to keep it relevant to the topics at hand in the same way that I did here. But there is definitely some knowledge that you can use in these playlists to help you better understand what I am talking about. If you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, share, and a sub. Throw me a comment. If you agree or disagree, if it remains respectful, it gets to stay up. And if you really like what I'm doing, hit me with that super thanks, because I am not a communist. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt's Take. Peace.